And how do you do, Buckaroos? How the heck are you? It's Tom the Beer Whisperer, and it's finally a Friday at the Beer Whisperer Pub. And we don't typically, have any prearranged topics, and this one wasn't necessarily prearranged; it just sort of happened. But we're going to talk a little bit about white whiskeys or corn whiskeys or legal moonshines or whatever you like to call them. What I've got here is one from Rocktown out of Little Rock, Arkansas. They call it Arkansas Lightning, distilled in a copper pot still, just like Granddaddy used to make. Arkansas corn whiskey. This one is 55% or 110 proof if you're keeping score. I've actually poured it for myself three ways here. I've got some just neat. It's not typically a whiskey you drink neat, but I've got this Rocktown glass. I also have a chilled shot here that I'm going to drink. And then I've also made it as a Manhattan, and I'm going to show that to you here real quick. There you go. So, Red, what whiskey did you bring for this particular session?
Okay, Tom, I've got a moonshine or corn whiskey from Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Uh, I took a family vacation to the Smoky Mountains a couple of years back and took the kids to Dollywood and, Pigeon Forge and all that. But we also went out to Gatlinburg and visited a couple of moonshine distilleries. And one of the ones that we visited was Sugarlands. And I picked up a couple mason jars of their corn whiskey, which is moonshine. So the one that I have tonight, and I'm going to sample, is called Silver Cloud, and that is a 100 proof uh, corn whiskey. So um, it's good. I've also got myself a beer, so I'm going to be drinking beer and corn whiskey.
Well, I'm trying the chilled shot first before it becomes a non-chilled shot. And you and I have talked a little bit about this, but for those of for those that weren't part of that conversation, corn whiskeys have let's say a unique unique aroma and flavor profile. Would you say?
Yes, well, let's call it what it really is. This is moonshine. This is what you heard about that was for years and years and years made illegally by people in the hills and hollers of, mainly, southern states, West Virginia, Virginia, Tennessee. It's illegal booze, is what it is, and it was usually made from, corn, and it's corn whiskey and made, pot stilled. And I know there was a show that was on one of those channels not too long ago called Moonshiners that made moonshine particularly popular. And I don't know exactly when it started to happen, but they started to distill this stuff legally. And I know in Virginia, it's going back for at least 10, 12, 13 years. There's been legally made moonshine, and the guy that made it from the one distillery that I used to always get it from was a moonshiner. His families were moonshiners, and they used to make it illegally for years, but finally it's legal. And that was called Virginia Lightning, and it was in Culpeper, Virginia, and the name of the place was Belmont Farms. And Belmont Farms, for a short period, was bought out by some chef from I don't even know where, but he relabeled it and called it moonshine. And what used to be $10 a bottle all of a sudden became $30 a bottle. So
Yeah.
I stopped buying that, but it's actually come back as Virginia Lightning. So and the price has actually dropped again. But yeah, I mean, my first experience with moonshine was probably about 28 years ago when I was in the service. I was in the Marine Corps, and a friend of mine was from North Carolina, and he used to go get his moonshine from a moonshiner in North Carolina. North Carolina is another state that has lots of moonshine, and I would buy it for about $20 a gallon back then, and that was in
Wow.
the late '80s. But I got to tell you, this stuff was really, really good stuff, and it was probably about 120 proof, so it was rocket fuel.
Well, this one I've got here clocks in at 110 proof, and I'm going to read just a touch from their bottle here because it kind of touches a little bit of what you just said. Arkansas Lightning is corn whiskey, or what some might call moonshine. Of course, moonshine is a name for illegal whiskey, which is why theirs is called Arkansas Lightning. So yeah, moonshine was typically illegal whiskeys. A lot of these have clever names to them. I have the same problem that you kind of alluded to with some of these. They've been kind of trendy over about the last 5 years, but they're not cheap.
No, and that's the thing. I mean, that's why I like this Virginia Lightning so much. This was 100 proof corn whiskey, and they would even say it's called fresh corn whiskey because once they distill it, they bottled it. It wasn't aged in any kind of oak barrels. It wasn't like a bourbon,
No, no. That's
nothing
completely
like that.
amazing.
I mean, this is clear, and it's got a very distinctive aroma and flavor. When you're drinking moonshine or corn whiskey, you know you're drinking corn whiskey. It's a taste that a lot of people need to get used to because even the ones that they're making now commercially and that are these legal moonshine distilleries, if you've ever had it, you know what you're drinking, and even if they put fruits in it and apples and cherries and all the sweet tea and all this other stuff, you really taste the corn and you can really smell that astringent alcohol. And people talk about alcohol being hot and whiskey's being hot, and moonshine is hot. I mean, when you drink this,
Well, it's intended to be. That's the nature of the beast.
well, yeah, you really feel the burn when you drink a moonshine. I mean, it warms your belly as soon as you get it down you. It's coming back with a bit of fire, and that's part of the appeal. So I like moonshine. I like fresh corn whiskey, and Virginia is lucky. It has lots of good ones, and of course, that show Moonshiners was based in Virginia. And as a matter of fact, somebody that used to be a Lynchburg police officer for 5 years, and one of his jobs as a Lynchburg police officer was busting up these illegal joints that were selling moonshine. So,
Oh, is that right? Wow.
yeah, so we have a lot of experience in history with moonshine here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and I like it, and not everybody does like it, but I like that hot, very astringent alcohol, and I like that fresh corn taste, and it's definitely in a good moonshine, and there's no mask in it, no matter how much cherries or whatever you add to it. You're drinking moonshine.
Well, there are some good quality. I mean, just like any other product, there's good stuff out there and there's not good stuff out there. But either way, I've got a very good quality one here, and I've poured in It's not typically designed to be drank this way, but it's out of curiosity. I poured it in a Nosing or Glencairn glass just to see what I can get out of it. And you do get those notes of fresh corn. There's no doubt about it. And I've had other versions that are less than 110 that I found harsher than this one. So I know I've got a very good quality one, but it is designed to taste a specific way, and you have to kind of have an acquired taste for it.
I agree with you, and I like that taste. And if you like that taste, you're going to enjoy these legal versions of moonshine. Of course, you know why I got the name moonshine, right, Tom?
No, enlighten us.
Well, it's because these stills were out in the hills, and they would actually start doing the distilling under the light of the moon. So they would be doing it at night. So yeah, it was moonshine. So they wouldn't be doing it during the day, because because of the light they might get caught. So they would do all the distilling and all that at night. So hence the word moonshine. So.
Well, it might not have been quite as prevalent here where I'm at, but there are some, hill oak in my neck of the woods. And my wife, kind of off camera, was telling me, a lot of, way back when did that sort of thing. Real distant relatives and that sort of thing. So yeah, it was just kind of what folks did in the backwoods back then.
Yeah, and it was a source. It was a source of revenue for a lot of these people as well. Some of the moonshines, and I've had moonshine that was illegally made, and I tell you, it was fantastic stuff. Again, I used to buy it by the gallon, and I thought back in the 80s paying $20-25 a gallon was expensive, but again, it came off, I don't know what it came off the still as, but when I finally got the final product, and the guy that used to get it for me who was from North Carolina. His family were moonshiners. He said this is about 120 proof you get, and it was it was definitely white lightning for sure, and I loved it.
Well, just to add a little bit here, this one I'm drinking here, it says it's double distilled Arkansas corn and wheat. So this one adds a little bit of wheat mash to the corn, so it's not just a corn whiskey.
Right, and I think with a lot of the moonshines, they do add wheat, and they can add rye, and they can add even malt, and it doesn't even have to be corn. I mean, if you ever watched the show Moonshiners, they didn't call it moonshine, but one time Tim and what was the other guy's name? I can't even remember. But they had a whole bunch of bananas that they got, and they distilled the bananas and made a liquor out of the bananas. So it's any kind of fermentable, really. But the immigrants that came over from Ireland and Scotland brought all those traditions with them. I mean, in Ireland, I've had illegal moonshine over there. They call it poitín, and poitín made from,
yeah. I've had some legal versions of that. That's interesting.
A lot of people are under the misconception that it's made from potatoes. Potatoes, of course, is a fermentable, and they could use potatoes, but most poitín is made from wheat and rye as well. It's made from from grain, so it's good. And there's a lot of Irish songs about moonshine, and I don't know if you ever heard of songs called the Moonshiners. It's traditional Irish songs. So moonshine is something that's been around for a very, very long time.
Well, a couple of years ago, my wife and I visited Kentucky, and there's a small distillery out there called Limestone Branch Distillery, and what they do out there they call sugar shine, which is 50% corn, 50% sugar, and that was very interesting stuff. And I bought a bottle of what they called Minor Case Revenge Double Oak Sugar Shine, which is their sugar shine that they aged in oak barrels. I believe they said for 18 months, but there were oak staves in the barrel as well, and that stuff was just crazy good.
Sounds good to me, yeah. So I would just suggest to people that want to try fresh corn whiskey, to try moonshine, maybe try to get a sample of it first at a bar or something before you go out and purchase a bottle, because I'll say it again, it's an acquired taste. It has a very distinctive taste, and you might not like it at first, but after maybe 1 or 2 or 3 shots of it, it'll grow on you.
It does. Well, for me, it's taken a little longer than that. I first started drinking them about 5 years ago, but over the years, I've gotten. Well, I was very hard on the first couple that I sampled. I did videos for, and I've said that I need to go back and revisit those because I really wasn't understanding what I was drinking. And now I've got a better grasp of what I'm drinking. Now I understand what they're doing.
Yeah, and it's got a very long and storied history, and there's a lot of information out there on the web and on the internet, and if you want to look it up and go into the history a little more, it's a very interesting history. It's something here that we've done with the corn and everything, and that's because corn was so plentiful. Yeah, it's a good thing, especially in the states that distill it and make it. It's a point of pride, especially in like Tennessee and in Virginia.
Yeah.
I mean, the people are proud of it because it's a part of their colonial heritage and it's a part of their heritage. So, I like it. The whole thing is like, oh, it's all hillbillies, and when you go to Gatlinburg, they really play that whole hillbilly thing up, and they're playing bluegrass music and all that. But I enjoy it. I mean, that whole part of it's kind of for the tourist trade and everything. But they're making a quality product, and this distillery Sugarlands is doing a great job. So if you ever get to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and the Great Smoky Mountains, which is absolutely beautiful. It's well worth stopping at the moonshine distilleries that are right in the downtown area.
This one I'm drinking here, neat. You really notice that sweetness right up front. I mean, it's trying to look at this like any whiskey that I would write a review for. You get all that sugar initially for me right up front, and then it sort of becomes a little boozy at the end. But yeah, I gotta say though, I'm kind of with you. I mean, once you understand what these are supposed to do, I don't find this harsh in the least, and it is 110 proof.
No, I mean they go down pretty smooth. I mean they are hot. I mean they're not harsh when you drink them. It's just you really feel the burn once you drink
You
it.
do-
So
there is a little burn, I'll tell you that. I've also got one fixed here. I've been experimenting with this batch. I've got one fixed here as a Manhattan. What I've done is about 2 ounces of that Rocktown whiskey with some sweet vermouth, a couple cherries, and some orange bitters. So I've kind of used it in place of, well, typically, traditionally in a Manhattan you use rye, not a corn whiskey. But so I've kind of taken some liberties here. I got like a hillbilly Manhattan going on here.
nice. Well, what I've been doing is I'm drinking it straight, and I'm chasing it with a beer. So I'm doing a beer and shot chaser type of deal.
Well, that
So
makes sense.
I'll take a little bit of the moonshine. I'll drink a nice little sip of that, and then I'm gonna chase it with a little bit of Guinness, and it's a good 1-2 punch.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally, obviously, this isn't a traditional Manhattan, but it actually works. I mean, that corn whiskey works well in here because it does add a little bit of sweetness. The vermouth, the bitters, kind of help take some of that burn away. So you've got a nice drink, whether you want to call it a Manhattan or what, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, it actually works.
Well, yeah, I mean Manhattans are traditionally made with brown liquors, and of course bourbon is a great choice for Manhattan. And
Yeah,
bourbon is of course 51% corn in the mash, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so you would think that maybe moonshine would work in a Manhattan,
It does. It
and
works
that's
for
what they
me.
do too
Works for
at
me,
these
by golly.
at these distilleries. They give you recipes of all these different cocktails that you can make
Mhm.
with moonshine, replacing traditional type of liquors. So it's pretty versatile. I mean, you can cook with it too, and I
Yeah.
enjoy it. It's not something that I would sit and drink every day, but it's nice every now and then to whack a couple of these back with some beer. I haven't really mixed it too much. I've got this one. It's the straight up moonshine, and when we went, my wife got like two of the flavored ones. One was apple pie, which tasted just like apple pie, and the other one was sweet tea, and that one seemed to work really well too. So she kind of likes that. And when her girlfriends come over and they break it out, and they don't drink too much of it, but they all seem to like it. So
Yeah, the apple pie flavors are real popular out here. Yeah, you see everybody doing an apple pie. I did have a sweet tea version a while back, and that was interesting too. I kind of like that. It wasn't this brand. I can't remember what brand it was now, but yeah, it was very good. The sweet tea moonshine. I remember really liking that one as well.
So we talked earlier about this, and I want you to give your opinion, Tom. What do you think about these white whiskeys and the prices? You know my opinion because I told you this one was called Virginia Lightning, was only $10 a bottle. Then all of a sudden it got boosted up to 30. I mean, what do you think of paying $30 a bottle for a fresh, whiskey that's not aged at all in an oak barrel or anything?
Well, that's my issue, right? That's my issue is price with these things. For instance, this is 110 proof whiskey, and it ran $30 a bottle, which in the grand scheme of what most of these are costing, that's really not bad. I mean, I've seen some at 80 proof for between $25 to $30 a bottle. I've seen some at 90 proof for about $30 a bottle. A lot of them are kind of getting by on a specific name they put on their brand, or a pretty bottle, and they're capitalizing on the trend. But even for this one, for me, I mean, this is 110 proof, and this really is probably the best one I've ever had. Just like this. Um, I can buy their 90 proof whiskey. Now I'm talking a 90 proof aged whiskey, a 90 proof bourbon, rye, or their Arkansas Hickory Smoke whiskey for about 35 a bottle. So I mean, it's kind of that trade off. What do you want? For me, it's hard not to spend that extra five to get an aged whiskey because, to be honest with you, personally, I prefer an aged whiskey. But I got to tell you, every once in a while, a whiskey like this does taste pretty good. It is kind of a change of pace, I guess. But a lot of them are way overpriced. Yes, in my opinion.
Yeah, I will agree with that. There is a tradition, though, for white whiskey. It goes back to colonial times. George Washington, the first president of the United States, was a distiller. On his Mount Vernon estate, he had a distillery. It's actually, I've been to it. If you go tour Mount Vernon, they've actually got a tour of the distillery, and they're actually making whiskey there again. They started making whiskey there. I can't remember when, but it's a couple of years back, and it is a white whiskey because that is what Washington made. It didn't go into a barrel. It went right from, well, it went to a barrel, but it went right to market. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't one that they aged. And you could buy at Mount Vernon, and it's very, very rare when they do it, but you can actually buy the white whiskey, and it's very expensive. But again, it's because it's coming from Mount Vernon, and it's made in such small amounts. But I've never been able to get my hands on a bottle, but I know Chuck Triplett has got a couple bottles of it, and it's apparently very, very good. So one of these days I'll see if I can get my hands on some of that. So yeah, it's like I'm like you. I'd rather have aged whiskey. I'd rather have, something that's going to sit in a barrel for at least 4 years or more. But there is a market for these fresh corn whiskeys, and they hit the spot on certain occasions, and I like them. So yeah, I'm all about having them every now and then.
Well, they've got these barrels that you can buy now, the small, like 5 liter barrels. And I'd actually like to buy one and then take a couple bottles of this and age it for a couple years and see what I'd end up with. Because this is some really fine whiskey. And to age that, I'm really curious to see what it would end up, being aged for a period of time.
Oh yeah, I've seen a number of little distilleries around here doing that. One that's not too far away from me is one called Copper Fox, and they're in Sperryville, Virginia, and they do exactly that. They have these kits where you can buy the little barrel,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they give you the whiskey, and the whiskey is like this. It is a white whiskey, and then they suggest you put it in this little barrel that you buy, and they let you like self age it. And then
Mhm.
once you do that, you can keep adding to it. And that's something that I was thinking about doing. I probably should have done it because it's always nice to have a little barrel of whiskey. I mean, what's better than having a little barrel of whiskey in your house? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. I've been telling myself for years I'm going to buy one, then I never get around to it, but I really want to.
So, any other thoughts on moonshine or white whiskeys, Tom, or any other kind of whiskeys like this that you might be interested in speaking about?
Well, I've got a local distillery. I was going to buy some from them, but I found this one when we were out of town about a week ago, so I really wanted to do it. I've got a small distillery in town called Missouri Spirits House. Now they do a corn whiskey, but they bottle it at 80 proof, so it's a little bit lighter than this one. It sells for about 25 a bottle, and I've had some. I had a bottle of it, to be honest with you, but I had some at the distillery there on the rocks, and it's very smooth, very drinkable. It's very nice. They do a young bourbon that's aged about 2 years, but that's not unusual for small distilleries to only age 2 years. A lot of, of course, we know the big guys, most of them do for at least 4. But even though these boutique distillers that are aging for only 2 years, I mean, it doesn't feel like a typical rot gut 2-year-old bourbon. It's very nice. But I think a lot of towns are coming up, as popular as craft beer and as many breweries are popping up. I think a lot of towns are starting to see these kind of, these smaller boutique distilleries popping up all over. And as we speak, I got a rock town in the background, so that's good timing.
That's cool. And yeah, I've noticed that myself. A lot of craft brewers have become craft distillers, or as you said, a lot of these little craft boutique craft distilleries are popping up here and there. And I've got one fairly close to me that I was going to go to last week, but I missed out on it because change of plans. And I was going to go this week, but of course we're getting hit with this huge snowstorm, so I'm not going to get there. But I'll get there eventually. But we're getting buried with snow right now. So is it
Yeah,
snowing
how
where
bad
you're
are
at?
you getting hit out there right now?
It's pretty bad. It started right around noon and it's not stopping, and it looks like it's going about an inch per hour. So we're supposed to get anywhere from 2 to 4 feet of snow. So
Oh
that's a
wow.
lot of
So
snow.
is that normal for you guys, or is that a lot?
Say that again, Tom.
Is that typical in your neck of the woods, or is that a lot? I
That's a
mean, it
lot.
sounds like a lot to me, but I know some place, like my dad grew up in South Dakota. That's a winter out there. It's not nothing
Yeah.
unusual, but
No, it snows quite frequently where I grew up in New England, but you don't usually get these amounts. And in the Mid Atlantic too, we had a huge snowstorm a couple years back, and we had like record snowfalls here. It was like same thing. It was like 2 to 4 feet, and some places even got even more than that. Last year in New England, Boston, Rhode Island, all over New England, where my parents lived, they got buried in snow, the most snow Boston has ever seen. So yeah, I mean it's not typical to have this much at one storm, but this is going to be probably another record storm in this area.
like any Irish alcoholic, I switched to beer. So I just popped the 6 point global warmer at 7%, 70 IBUs. Have you had this before?
I have. I've had a lot of 6 point beers. 6 point has been in the DC metro area for a number of years. I believe they started up, they're probably almost 10 years old or more. I want to say they started in 2004. Is it on the can?
No, not that I see here.
They've been around for a while. They're in the Red Hook section of Brooklyn. I used to go a lot to Brooklyn and into Red Hook. But when I was going up to Brooklyn and into Red Hook, and that particular brewery wasn't there, but I need to make a revisit because I really like their beers, and I've had that one that you're drinking right there, Global Warming, but I don't think I picked it up this winter, but I know I've had it for a couple years now, 2 or 3 years I've had it. I liked it from what I remember. Is that it's very hoppy and malty, isn't it?
It is. It's a lot of both. Yeah, 7%, 70 IBUs. I mean, yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, it could be an old school IPA. I mean, it's not what IPA. You know what I mean? It's got that big malt with the big hops. It'd be an old school IPA. But I actually can't get 6 point in my neck of the woods. I picked it up about a week ago in Arkansas. They had it in Arkansas of all places, but I can't get it here in Missouri.
Yeah, I've been able to get them, like I said, for a while, since I think pretty much since they've been around, and I really like them. They're a very, very good brewery, doing a number of different beer styles. They got really good marketing and just quality stuff. Everything I've tried from them, I've pretty much liked. I don't think I've had a beer from them that I didn't like. So, yeah, they're a good brewery.
No, I've liked everything I've had, and I hadn't had this one before, which is why I bought it. They only had two flavors from them. They had this and the resin. I had the resin before, but I bought a 6 pack anyway because I really like that beer.
Resin's a good one. Yeah, if you've had it, you know it's a hop monster and lots of hops, lots of alcohol. So it's with double IPA, and of course double IPAs today are around everywhere, but that's a particularly good one. I think we did one time a double IPA tasting, and we included resin and Sierra Nevada Optimum
Mhm.
with Pliny the Elder and Heady Topper, and they might have not have been the number one or two choices, but they were up there. They were respectable, and we also had the DC Brow on the Wings of Armageddon, and that one kind of like blew all the other ones away. So, but it depends on your taste. I mean, I myself am a Heady Topper guy. I like Heady Topper a lot. I've been to the brewery up in Vermont before they stopped the tours, and back before they all got flooded out, and they were a brew pub, which is now another brew pub called Prohibition Pig. I I've been to Heady Topper when they were a brew pub, and I've been to Santa Rosa, and I've been to Mad River, Russian River as well. So yeah, both great double IPAs, and the ones that a lot of people like to put a lot of hype behind. I think in this case, the Heady Topper and the Pliny the Elder live up to the hype, but are they, so much head and shoulders above everything that's out there? I really don't think they are. There's just, and we've talked about this before too, there's just way too many good beers and breweries out there now that you don't have to go after the quote unquote whale. And I think that is one of the biggest
Gosh, I hate
jerk off
that term.
terms
Really,
that has ever come into the craft beer world. If I find out who the guy is who came up with the term whale, I will personally remove his teeth one tooth at a time.
yeah, it's just a stupid term. I don't like it at all. It doesn't make sense.
Well, it's pretentious, It's the whole like, I'm going after the rare thing, and I'm
Yeah.
somebody. I don't get it. I don't like it. There's a lot of the craft beer culture that's coming around today. I just don't really particularly care for, which I like that you were talking about with the two Hoosiers you had with you, the Indiana guys. I
Yeah.
watched that. Very good, Tom. Another good session. You are a very good publican. I'll tell you that much. I mean, you're doing double duty today.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I've got an understanding wife.
you've had the bar open all day, so that's pretty cool. But it was nice hearing those two guys talk and give their perspective and talk about what part of the country they're from and the kind of beers that they have there and all that. So yeah, that was nice watching that one. I enjoyed watching that.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. And yeah, I've met those guys a couple of years ago, and they took me to a New Albanian brewery. Actually, I guess they have two brewery tap rooms, I guess, or brew pubs, I guess they are. We went to the pizzeria. The pizza there was fantastic, by the way. But yeah, it's just a fun, just a fun kind of brew pub. It's big, it's loud, and their beer is fantastic. I think New Albanian is an underrated brewery. They're doing some great stuff out there.
I've actually had their beers. You can't get their beers here, but I don't remember who exactly. It was either Lyle Brown. As a matter of fact, I know it was Lyle. But before Lyle, I've had him as well. But I think Lyle went out to Indiana and did a whole tour of Indiana. He brought back a ton of beers from Indiana. He had like 5 or 6 from New Albanian that he brought back, and he had even more from Sun King, which is Indianapolis. And
Sun King, yeah.
Yeah, and then he had Three Floyds, and I've been to Three Floyds. My brother actually lived in Indiana for about 12 years, so I used to go out and visit him in Indiana, but he lived in West Lafayette, which is, close, not too far from Indianapolis and Chicago. So we would go, to Chicago a lot, and I would hit a lot of Chicagoland breweries. So, I got to go to Three Floyds, and of course I hit all the ones in Indianapolis. And, at the time, there was a couple in Lafayette, West Lafayette as well, and all that. So Indiana is a pretty good state if you like beer.
Yeah, where they are in Sellersburg, which is right on the other side of Louisville, Kentucky. So they're close to a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I think they're in the southern Indiana and Kentucky area.
Yeah, we had a good time out there. It was nice. I didn't stay in Louisville. We went out there. We actually stayed in a small town called Bardstown, and that's where a lot of the liquor distilleries are. I mean, Jim Beam, Wild Turkey are right in that area. At that time, I didn't do any distillery tours. We just weren't able to do that at the time, but it was nice to see that the amount of bourbon that you could find in that area was incredible.
Oh yeah, I remember the videos.
I bought a bottle, and I wish I'd have bought like a dozen of them because they were really that good. It was Heaven Hill, 100 proof, bottled in bond, and it was only $10 a bottle. And I got to tell you, it's the best $10 whiskey I've ever had in my life.
I remember that.
It was just beautiful whiskey for $10.
Yeah,
I was really kicking myself for not buying at least a half a dozen.
I remember you going kind of crazy for that one, and I remember you yourself this nice.
Did I lose your red? I kind of on you for a second.
So I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah. Your audio kind of went off there for a little bit. Yeah, it was nice. I mean, it wasn't the most, and I think I said this in my video. It wasn't necessarily the smoothest or most nuanced bourbon, But I mean, for $10, the thing was just amazing. I mean, it had nice oak notes. It wasn't really one. It wasn't a bourbon that you want to sit and dissect, right? But I mean, if you were drinking it on the rocks or with a little water, I mean, it was a perfect bourbon.
Yeah, that's the kind of bourbon that you like for hooting and hollering. That's the stuff that you mix with Coke, and that's the stuff that, is a good mixer, or you just want to bang back as a shot with a beer. So I love those kind of bourbons. Those are great. I mean, I like highballs. That'd be a good highball liquor, right?
That's what it is, man. That would be the quintessential highball liquor. Yeah, if I ever get back to that neck of the woods, I swear to goodness, I'm going to buy a case of that whiskey at $10. My wife kind of give me the look. But yeah, I will, because the stuff really is that good for $10.
So,
I mean,
Tom, a lot of people, younger people, or people who might not know a lot about the bar trade and bars, and the correct terminology. And I know you've explained it before, but explain to people what a highball is.
well, there are some exceptions, as there are with anything, but traditionally a highball was one liquor, one mixer. For instance, a 7 and 7. That's a classic highball. Seagram 7 and 7 Up. That's a classic highball. Jack and Coke. That's a classic highball. And you can serve it in any glass you want to nowadays, but traditionally, I'm being an old school bar guy, they were served in cylindrical glasses. Either you could order them in either short or tall. Now, there was a misconception that if you ordered a tall, you were getting more whiskey. No, if you ordered a tall, you were getting more mixer. You had to order a double, and you can get a double in either a short or tall. The only thing short or tall meant was how much mixture you wanted in your highball.
Right, right. And I remember in the Northeast and New England, particularly, Canadian whiskeys are very popular, and CC and ginger, even to this day,
Oh
is a
yeah,
classic is a classic highball up there. I remember my mom's not really a big booze drinker, but when she would go out with my father, and then she felt that she was in the mood to have a cocktail, she would always get a highball, and she would always order a Canadian Club and ginger ale. So CC and ginger is a classic, and I actually like CC and ginger myself. Are you a big Canadian whiskey drinker, or what's your experience with Canadian whiskeys?
well, that's another thing. For a long time I didn't get Canadian whiskeys. They have a bigger rye bill, although it's not necessarily a rye whiskey, but Canadian whiskeys have a bigger rye bill. But yeah, I have grown. Uh, I have acquired a taste for them, let's say. There's a couple I like. I mean, people want to concentrate on name brands, just like beer, right? You want to look at the big Canadian whiskey that every bar has is Crown Royal. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad whiskey, but there are other Canadian whiskeys for about the same price that I believe are much better quality. Like I really like 40 Creek. It runs about the same price as Crown, but for me, it's a much more nuanced whiskey than Crown is.
Well, I wish Jeff Lyons would have popped in here, because he's in New Hampshire, and he has a lot of exposure to Canadian whiskeys, being in northern New England. And I could say, from living in southern New England for most of my life, Canadian whiskeys up there are very popular, and they're very good, and they're very affordable for the quality of whiskey you're getting. It's really a good bargain to get a good Canadian whiskey, and even the big name brands are very well crafted. So if anybody thinks they want to try a Canadian whiskey, go ahead and try Canadian Club, or Canadian Mist, or or Crown Royal, like you said, and give it a go, because Canadians make some really, really good whiskey.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, they use rye bill as where bourbon uses 51% corn. Most bourbons use 51% corn and use rye as a secondary grain. Although Pappy's was the first to use wheat as a secondary grain, and now you're seeing a lot of smaller distilleries doing their bourbons. They're using wheat as a secondary grain. It gives you a softer mouthfeel. It makes it a little sweeter. You kind of lose that spice in, and that's kind of what rye does. It gives you those spice notes.
Yes, indeed. And rye whiskey is very popular as well with an older generation. My father was a big rye drinker. He used to drink rye, and I remember as a kid seeing this bottle's called Rock and Rye, whatever Rock and Rye was. He used to drink that a lot. But Pennsylvania has a very long tradition with rye whiskeys, and there was one that was distilled in Pennsylvania for years called Michner's that went out of
Oh
business.
yeah, yeah. I'm
And
familiar with them.
Michner's, moved from Pennsylvania, and they used to make a bourbon. Now, people think
Mhm.
bourbon has to be made in Kentucky. That's a common misconception. Bourbon can be made anywhere, but under the federal code, bourbon has to have certain things in it. The mash has to be at least 51% corn, and
And
it
it has
has
to
to
be
be
an age of
aged in
2 years.
charred oak barrels, unused charred oak barrels, and you've got bourbon. I mean, theoretically, you
Yeah.
could make a bourbon in Hawaii if you want to, if as long as you stay within the federal code, it is bourbon. Oh, and it has to be aged, of course, at least 4 years. So
Well, actually, well, to technically be bourbon, it has to be at least 2 years, but most will age it 4. But yeah, it has to be a minimum of 2 years.
right, but the misconception that it has to be distilled in Kentucky, that is a
No.
common misconception. It
Yeah.
does not.
No, it does not. No, the mash bill has to be 51% corn,
Right, right, exactly.
and it has to be aged in charred, well, typically charred American oak barrels,
That would
unused.
unused. Yeah.
And a lot of, well, Irish whiskeys and Scotches as well age their whiskey in, well, used or uh, uh, bourbon barrels.
Oh yeah, that's been going on for decades and decades. Those used bourbon barrels go over to distilleries in Scotland and Ireland, and
Yeah,
scotches. People don't know this either. Most scotches are aged in used bourbon barrels.
yeah, most are, and most Irish as well. And then, I think that's why my whiskey of choice really are bourbon and Irish whiskeys. Those are my two favorites, to be honest with you. I do drink Scotch upon occasion. I've dabbled in Canadian whiskey, and recently I've acquired a taste for rye. But I got to tell you, I really love bourbon and Irish whiskey. I think bourbon is the boldest of them all, in my opinion. I think Scotch is very unique and has a certain flavor, but I think bourbon is the boldest. I think Irish whiskey is the smoothest. Irish whiskey is very smooth and mellow and easy to drink, even some cheaper versions of. Uh, so those are my two favorites, but I do enjoy all whiskeys, even the
Oh,
white ones that we enjoyed earlier.
yeah, I love whiskeys too, but it can be a very, very expensive habit. So that's why I kind of stick to the beer. But I'm with you. I'm on the same page with you, Tom. I really enjoy whiskeys, and I don't drink as much spirits as well, like I said, as I should. But the reason I don't is I'm really concentrating more on beer than anything else. But I really do love spirits. I know you don't particularly care for rum that much, but I'm really a big rum guy too. I really like rum. So rum is great for me. Bourbon is great for me. Irish whiskey, of course. I like Scotch. I could really get into Scotch, but the single malts, the blended Scotch is great. So yeah, if you're into spirits, there's a lot of great spirits out there too. And I think, the craft beer movement and the whole craft spirits thing, they work hand in hand. They really do.
I do. And since you brought up rum, a current trend in rum is aged rums.
Yes, yes. And I have some aged rums. I think one rum that I have from I can't remember where it's from. It's somewhere in the Caribbean. It might be one that's been aged. I have to take a look. I think I've got one from Antigua that's aged for 10 years. But most of the rums that I was drinking, and we've talked about this too in the past, is I've been getting really into the little micro distilled rums, and
Yeah, yeah, me
I was
too.
telling you about the little rum distillery in Rhode Island from where I was from, um, Thomas Two's, and that's a great rum. It's named after a pirate that was, I guess, based in Newport. But I remember when I was out in Portland, Oregon, years ago, and I went to Rogue, and Rogue was one of the first ones to do a distillery as well.
Yeah.
And I remember going out and having their hazelnut rum, which is based on their
Oh wow.
hazelnut porter, or yeah, the hazelnut brown ale that they had. And they do a rum with the hazelnut, and that's great. I remember bringing a bottle back, and of course it's long since gone, but you can get it in a number of liquor stores in certain markets. But yeah, most of these craft breweries that become craft distilleries as well do a very, very good job with their whiskeys and rum. So if you see one that you go to and you visit, spend that extra money and say, you know what, let me get a bottle of your booze as well.
Yep, I agree. So, Red, as we wrap this session up, any parting words about the whiskeys or the beer or the spirits? Anything you want to finish off with?
Well, just that a caveat to people that want to try moonshine and try fresh corn whiskey, as we stated earlier, it has a very distinctive aroma and flavor, and it's something that you might have to get used to. You might love it right away, you might hate it. So just caveat emptor on that one. Buyer beware.
There you go. Yeah, it is. And like I said, for me, I mean, it's taken a few years to really understand them because I think I might have judged the first few I had unfairly just because I didn't understand what I was drinking. So there you go. Hey, I'm Tom the Beer Whisperer. I thank Red for joining me for this session at the Beer Whisperer Pub. And we're out of here, guys.